public still has confidence in the police service.
Oh, we had to break that tie. Somebody send a message quickly. Let's break that tie. Let's break that tie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tied.
Okay.
Or maybe we should just leave it tied.
Mr. Carapo just popped in and said no to the poll.
Maybe we should have left it tied because, I mean, that's probably the natural sentiment that people, you see, once we tell people break a tie.
Well, it's not tied. Mr. Carapo said no, so it's 18-17.
No, I'm saying once we tell people to break a tie, it means that the first person calling either way will influence the poll.
That's right.
Kind of way.
And we have never had a tie. We never keep ties. So
well.
All right. So Paul, I need you to come in and bring our guest in. He's waiting in limbo. And Mr. Beeps also just said no. And Mr. Ingrid wants to know why we still have an acting police commissioner in Trinidad after all this time. I cannot comprehend.
Well, what do you mean, Paul, your mic is off?
Yeah, Ray out in West Palm Beach, Florida just said no as well.
Do not put Steve to work Elections and Boundaries Commission at all.
No, don't put me.
Because he go like me, go like the results, and then he go say, come, let some more votes come in to change the vote.
Yeah, you can call me Trump after that.
Corruption personified, that's what he is.
Call me Trump after that. Anyway.
Corruption personified. Bring some more votes, and I mean like that vote.
Recording in progress.
Let's say good morning, good out to Mr. Michael Anisat. Good morning to you, Michael. How you doing?
They're surviving. What about you and your team?
Well, I don't know about the team. Then what less? I doing good.
But maybe the person we should have polled was in fact Michael Anisat, our guest. If there's anybody who should have been allowed,
go ahead,
to break that tie, would have been Michael Anisat. So Michael Anisat, do you think that the population still has confidence and trust in the police?
No.
Okay, well, there we go. Do you?
Not 100%.
Okay. All right. So you're not impressed by the latest happenings in terms of finally we seeing charges and so on and arrests being made in the police service. Well, not finally, because we've had it over the period of time, but at least some of these matters that have been on the issue on the public's mind for a little while.
No, when I will be satisfied when I see genuine across the board addressing of all issues, including white-collar crime. Then I will be satisfied. When no one is above the law.
Okay.
So right now you feel there's some above the law? That's what you're saying?
Yes, I am saying.
And what do you base that on? That the fact that we haven't had a consistent addressing of white-collar criminals?
Yeah, that is one. Two, the workers and the citizens in the depressed communities, sometimes they have to languish in jail for simple matters simply because they don't have the financial ability like other people to raise bail and get the kinds of lawyer that is necessary to use their skills, and I mean that is rather unfair to the citizens in the disadvantaged communities.
You're talking about the inequities in the criminal justice system.
Yes, I am.
I fully agree. It's much easier sometimes for the state to be looking at the little black boys along the east-west corridor, Chaguanas and San Fernando, as opposed to, I've just spoken about it over and over, the shoot and tie criminals.
Yeah.
Who are really the source of the gun and drug running?
Yes, who are the source? Because the question I normally ask is that the little black boy in Beetham or in Laventille or in Point 40, wherever don't have the financial capabilities of bringing in guns and drugs in this country, because drugs, as you know, is parallel to the economy and is big business. And I'm therefore, when you see the little boy getting whole and the killing, the question is to me is how do we stop the guns coming in and how do we stop the drugs from coming in, which is, pervasive within our society.
It's interesting you're saying that you have direct contact with the port, the legal port, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, some of your membership will work in the port, and there is the suggestion by some that the port, because the systems are not properly enacted to ensure that containers are scanned effectively and stuff like that, are one of the main ways that illegal guns and drugs come into the country. How would you suggest, or how would you respond to that kind of
No,
scenario?
I will say that you know, criminals will hardly use a legal port where we have patrols. It may not be adequate, but there are patrols and there are possibilities that everything can go wrong. But having said that, we in Trinidad and Tobago, we are quite aware of the unmanned ports all over Trinidad and Tobago, which is a place where drugs and guns come in, even foreigners, and we have all kind of illicit activities.
But when we're scanning and I'm being very generous here, 20 containers, even when containers are scanned and contraband found, there's the suggestion by some, well, I log back that, leave that alone. When the customs systems in the country have been found woefully lacking due to corruption, bribery, etc., I think I don't agree that the legal ports are not the problem also.
No, I am not saying that illegal ports, you don't have illegal activities, because I am quite aware, and I will give you an example. I was part of an exercise where in the Port-au-Point leases, I don't know if you could recall when I brought it to the attention and I was taken to task by 95.5 radio station, and eventually, you remember the cocaine in the chicken?
Yeah.
I remember cocaine in cans. Cocaine was in chicken too?
That cocaine in the juice cans too, yes.
Yeah, in juice, in cans, in the juice was for export, but in the chicken was what was coming in. And we sort of bring that to the attention of the authorities, and suffice it to say, well, no one got held because they raid the container even before the container was cleared. Surprisingly.
And no one charged. It's like the guns that they found coming in Bond in the Piarco airport recently. And then nobody charged for that. And that is what they fine. That is not counting what passed through and then catch it.
No, but you can have sting operations. But I guess we are not policemen, and we are not law enforcement. So I guess our suggestions, right, will be
going back to your first point. There are huge business interests that seem untouchable.
Yeah, it appears so to me too.
Yeah.
And it is demonstrative based on how some of these cases are allowed to take 10, 15, 20 years without anything happening. And I am rotting in jail. And when I say I mean the little black boy from the disadvantaged communities, and I mean, it must have a level of equality in terms of the justice system for people to believe in the justice system.
So, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley on Monday held a press conference where he invited Labour back to the National Tripartite. Why are you laughing? Let me finish your question before you start to laugh now. Oh, God.
All right, okay, all right.
Let me finish the question. I try to get through the question.
The
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley invited Labour, and I found it was an interesting place to do it, and an interesting point to do it. Not that I disagree with him doing it, because I think it's important for Labour, the state, private sector, and civil society to be on the same table talking. What do you make of the Prime Minister's timing and invitation of Labour back to the tripartite council?
All right, first, let me make it clear to the general public that this is the second time that Labour opted out of the committee. You may recall that the first time when the then Minister of Tourism was Ms. Kojo, she would have been flying out of the country, and she made a statement that they're going on restructure and how many people have to go in the tourism sector without any discussions with the union, which was Communication Workers Union at the time, with any engagement. And we thought that was a slap in the face given what we were discussing at that level in terms of the tripartite approach and what we want to do. We came out and we were convinced to come back out. But we have all kinds of issues that is happening, issues that labor would have raised of deep concern. And I will raise one, the question of the metal workers, where a company declared bankruptcy and he was able to close down fully. And as a consequence of that, workers couldn't get their benefits, because the law is that if a company closed down completely, you cannot access benefits. All right. So we attempted to change that. We argue that, and it's just a simple adjustment to the Industrial Relation Act that was wanted. And to date, that issue have not been addressed by the government. I will make another issue. A lot of people, they are not aware that the petrotrain issue, we attempted to put it on the table. And while the chairperson would have agreed from higher up, they would have said that is not for that committee to discuss. And there are several issues that I can demonstrate where, hey, Labour was attempting to have an agenda. We know there are different sectors and everybody will have their own agenda. But at the ending of the day, it was what was in the best interest of Trinidad. We cooperated with the question of productivity in Trinidad and Tobago. And when our members ask us, what are we getting out of this? Nothing. We raised the issue of outstanding negotiations and the cost to the government if you do not negotiate on time in terms of back pay. That was raised at that committee. We got support, but nothing was done. So that when the Prime Minister comes now and say, well, they're going to cost us so many $1 billion, right, in terms of back pay. The question is, weren't you aware as the government that when you fail to negotiate for your employees, not as a government, because the government in this instance is an employer, and when you so refuse to negotiate, you are just exacerbating and increasing the back pay to the workers, and therefore you cannot come 10 years after, 11 years after, 9 years after in some instances, as far as 2007, and then tell the workers that, listen, if I pay the back pay, well, you know, I will have to send no workers, or if I give you adequate wage increase, it will have consequences. I mean, what kind of economics is that? And we are saying in the trade union movement, and we strongly believe that the government had a policy of wage restraint and stagnating wages, why the inequality in income and wealth is growing wider and the gap is getting wider, which have all kinds of implications for the very social fabric of this society that we talk about.
But Ms. Annie said there was a time, I know that there were, I know you referenced one of the amendments to the Industrial Relations Act, but there were several amendments that I think were supposed to have gone forward when the first iteration of this government, when Jennifer Batiste Primus was the Minister of Labor, I see her smiling. There was supposed to be some level of labor reform in terms of the act and stuff like that. Nothing happened, according to what I'm gleaning from you. Nothing obviously has happened.
There has been no labor legislation brought to the Parliament since I've been there.
None whatsoever. And even when I was there.
Well, the government is now asking the unions to work along with them with regard to the wage negotiation. Is it that the unions are not receptive?
It will be unfair for the government to say work along. The daily rated workers and the other entities that falls under the remit of the CPO have been engaging the CPO in discussions. So it's not that we are not meeting. The groups that are not meeting is the statutory boards and other government entities that do not fall under the remit of the chief personnel officer. I will give you an example. As I speak to you, the ports still have a 12% wage increase to be implemented from since 2014 to 2017, and that hasn't been implemented and or addressed by the government, the NIB. And we have workers in MTS, we have workers in PTSC, workers at WASA, workers at the Institute of Marine Affairs, workers at CDC, and I could go on.
And those, you're talking about completed negotiations that have not been activated?
No. I am talking about negotiations where proposals have been sent to the respective board and management because we don't negotiate with the CPO. Let me give you an example. Port workers do not engage negotiations with the CPO. We submit our proposal, which we would have done to the board and management. They do a costing, they send it through the CPO, who is the secretariat, who takes it to the interministerial committee that is headed by Minister of Finance, who then gives the CPO directives in terms of remuneration packages, and that is sent back to the
board. But the CPO is still involved. You're making it seem as if the CPO is not involved, but the CPO is involved.
No, he's involved as the secretariat.
Well, as part of the Human Resource Advisory Committee that sits. Right.
He is, he don't give advice, he do all the research and he puts it on the committee. The committee determines what. In other words, he has no say in the matter. If the government says 5 and he say it should be 7 is what the government says. All right, so he really has no say, and we are still waiting for the government to direct the port to start negotiation for the period 2014, because that period has not yet been acquiesced to by this government, so it's still outstanding to the present time. Those are the realities, and the same thing applies to WASA, the same thing applies to PTSC, MTS. MTS workers about 2 weeks ago had a big demonstration in front of the head office expressing deep concerns over the management failure to date. But I understand what the management failure, they cannot move forward unless there's a directive coming from the interministerial committee. So the population do not understand that. And what is amazing, that in the private sector, we don't have that particular problem. I want the public to know that within the private sector, we have been able to finish and complete all negotiations up to date. Why it is that we have a problem always with the government?
Do you think the private sector is vocal enough in terms of their leverage on the government to complete their sides of the negotiation, given the fact that even though private sector negotiations, as you said, would have been completed, when public sector negotiations are outstanding, it also affects private sector efficiency?
I agree with you, and when I say I mean that I would have expressed some views to some of the private sector persons who were on the NTAC board to use your leverage to understand and send the understanding that when you have this kind of fallout in industrial relation, it affects the whole country in all kinds of shape and in form, and is necessary that we try to complete these negotiations.
How would you respond to those who suggest that, well, pulling out means that it's dead? At least staying in the council, the committee, means that you can still continue trying to have dialogue, trying to resolve the issues, and saying, well, we out. Because I think in one instance I saw, well, we're being used as window dressing. I think somebody said that, to say that we in talks and that because the government is not listening, it's like children throwing up their hands in the marbles in the air and saying, well, we ain't playing no more, as opposed to sticking it out and saying, you know what, let's continue to work this out.
All right. Well, we were in the committee for going in 6 years. And I don't know I mean, I am not Job, the trade union movement, we are not Jobs. We have a constituency, they have economic and financial realities that we have to address. I cannot go to my constituents and say after 6 years, there's no legislation to protect you in terms of all the industrial relation issues that we are seeing happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And then there is tripartitism and there's bipartitism. And bipartitism is between the employer and the trade union movements. And we are having wonderful discussions, suffice it to say, with the employers. About 3 weeks ago, the answer group of companies would have summoned 4 unions who have contracts with their various companies to sit down and discuss how do we do training, how do we address safety and all those issues. And that model is working in other entities. Right, when we had the issue with the COVID-19, all right, based on the lack of government guidance, we would have met with private sector employers and we were able to sit down and hammer out a policy that would have resulted in the safe passage of employees and how we work together collectively in order to ensure, we balance livelihood, all right, with life and a safe environment. And people do not talk about that, but we have been having those kinds of discussions. I could tell you in Point Lisas, we have a COVID task team. And if anything happens, the team meets immediately and address the issue, do the deep dive in order to find the solution, because we recognize when there's genuine discussions and a willingness to move forward on mutual respect and mutual benefits, you will have solutions.
Are you suggesting you don't think the government has shown that it's genuine? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, yes. I am saying that there is no excuse that this government can give me and the labor movement, and I'm not too for the failure for engaging the trade union in negotiations after 10, 12 years. No excuse whatsoever. That was a fiscal policy decision. And therefore, that is what the labor legislation, which was to be a priority, nothing has happened as it relates to that. The issue of other governments who used to have labor representative on boards, where statutory boards and etc. This government kick all that down the hill.
But Labour was a part of the last government. I'm not talking about Dr. Rowley's last administration. I'm talking about the People's Partnership.
Yeah.
As part of the government and had to leave.
Yeah, that is, well, I cannot answer that because it was a different federation. The National Trade Union Center was not part of that signing of that agreement. And the agreement that he very said would have signed with PNM too. So there were 2 signings of agreement.
But does that mean then that labor, as we're talking about labor, is not really a homogeneous, a united sector in terms of these types of interfaces with whatever government is in power? Because from what you're saying, that one aspect of labor may be willing to cooperate and another aspect maybe not. So you're talking about different signings and different groups there.
No, well, I don't know if signing a Faizabad Accord is cooperation. Cooperation begins when what you sign is translated into action. And that is what you have to judge, right? The signing of those documents, because
so it's political gamesmanship then. It might have been political gamesmanship then.
Well, it can be interpreted to mean
you're throwing your partner under the bus? That's what you're doing?
No, I say it can be interpreted.
You're throwing your partner, David Abdullah, under the bus?
I say it can be interpreted to mean that. But the National Trade Union Center have been very vocal and very principled in the context that any government that comes into power, we have to work with them, and we have demonstrated that. Notwithstanding the fact that there were governments who didn't want to work with us. The PNM, when they came in power under Dr. Rowley and the Minister Jennifer Baptiste, refused to engage in a talk. They refused to engage NATO, and they attempted to use the labor as a divisionary manner. But we survived. We survived as a National Trade Union Center. And similarly, when UNC came into power, they refused to engage NATO, but eventually, when you're talking about workers' business, you have to engage NATO. And I mean, and then I could demonstrate to you that under this government, all right, this government refused to accept me as the labor representative on Cipriani Labor College Board, and they put who they wanted, and we had to go to court, right? We had to go to the ILO where I pleaded the case. The ILO ruled against them, and the court in Trinidad and Tobago ruled against them too, and they had to pay money, and they had to put me back on the board because the law was clear and the government was willing to breach the law, all right, for whatever reason, because there was a representative from NATO and they wanted another representative. But that is life. But life has to go on. And one of the things that I have understand that wisdom has taught me that wisdom, do not lose.
Well, there's clearly no love lost between you and Dr. Rowley, Ms. Sani said.
Was that?
Yes, I said there's clearly no love lost between you and Dr. Rowley.
No. The National Trade Union Center respects anybody who is in power, and we have a responsibility to engage with whoever is in power. And we cannot bring personalities into this, and we don't do that. But
what's your relationship like, though? What's your relationship like, though, with the current Minister of Labour, Stephen McClatchy, whom we know very little about, and we hear and very little from?
Well, suffice it to say, the current minister have not met with the National Trade Union Center today. We would have met once. We would have, or should have met once, and there was technical glitches with the IT platform. There was a commitment to re-engage us, and that has gone through the window. We have
after 2 years?
Yeah.
I think he's been installed, it's coming up in 2 years now.
Yeah, it's coming up in 2 years.
No, more than 2 years. More than 2 years.
And he has not met with NATO yet?
No, he has not met with NATO yet. As a matter of fact, the advisory committee that is under the Industrial Relations Act, he has refused to put a NATO representative on that committee, notwithstanding 2 letters from NATO. Yeah, you see,
he has refused, or the government has refused?
Well, he's the Minister of Labour. He hasn't acknowledged our letters. He has not responded to our letters, and therefore I could only conclude, because he has the responsibility of selecting the members to that advisory committee that is enshrined in industrial relations.
But it's interesting that the Prime Minister is inviting you back to the National Tripartite Council, but these other arrangements have not been finalized.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we would like to go back, as I say, because we want to put Trinidad and Tobago first. But what we want,
all right, but under what conditions will you go back then? You've just said that you're willing to go back.
Yeah, we will want to go back where the independence of the committee is realized, where all the necessary tools and the human resources is given to that committee, because we see that committee as very fundamental. And when we look at what is happening in Barbados, Grenada, India, and I could go on, the Philippines, and all those islands and all those countries that have this system, it is given a prominence that we don't see in Trinidad and Tobago, right? The prominence or the issues are dictated by those who are on high up within the echelons of powers in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, when Labour, right, says we want to discuss that, we are not seeing the end results of those discussions. And you have quite rightly said, there is no labor legislation given all what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago.
There's some of your colleagues who have suggested that the committee that the Prime Minister has invited you back to, and in a very public way too, has been one, not as treating labor as equal partners. Would you agree with that one? And two, more akin to window dressing so that the government can say, well, we engaged with labor in the National Tripartite Council.
All right, let me answer the first question. The question of if you are equal or not, in my humble view, is about you. All right, the equality is not how people treat you, but the issue is how you stand up and make your voice heard. So let me put that right to rest. The other issue, I agree with what has been said, because there is nothing tangible that we can say as a social partner within the ambits of that committee that we could go back to our membership and say, listen, we have accomplished A, B, and C.
But is that as a result of your ability to negotiate effectively, or the mechanisms in the council have not facilitated those sorts of accomplishments?
No. I will say it is a policy decision, because at the ending of the day, whatever we do, the final decision in terms of acceptance or rejection comes to the Prime Minister. He determines that, so that we could talk now until next year. And I could tell you that we would have had engagements and we'd have agreed with one or two issues. All right, but nothing came out of it.
But in a practical sense, Mr. Anisette, any decision taken at the council level, committee level, because I think the committee is led by Mrs. Robinson-Regis, Minister Robinson-Regis, right? In a practical sense, whatever is discussed at the committee level, Mrs. Robinson-Regis, Minister Robinson-Regis, has to go back to the cabinet / the Prime Minister and get acquiescence. In any case.
All right, but let me.
You can't say yes on her own because you have a discussion and there's a proposal.
All right. Okay, well, I will anticipate that if I make somebody the chairperson of such an important committee that you are saying come back in, and you have other government ministers, I think it's about 5, even a representative from Tobago, one will expect in terms of good governance that if there's an issue that is up for discussion, that the chairperson and the government ministers will discuss with you what are the issues, and the relevant directives will be given so that we can have informed and meaningful discussions. It cannot be, and it must not be, that you come there, you make a commitment, and then you have to go to the cabinet to get a buy-in. That can't make sense.
But how can the chair representing the government not go back to the cabinet to get approval? And I'm hoping that you can take some calls, because our audience always is eager to interface with you. So we open the phone lines. Our guest is Mr. Michael Anisette, and you can interface with him with questions or comments. Though the chair is representing the government's interest.
Yes. Right. This is what I am saying. All right. If I, as a labor representative on that committee, who represents NATU, because it was the 3 federations who had representatives there. If there is anything that is being discussed, I have to go back to my central executive committee and my general council, bounce it off of them, and then get directives in terms of what direction you have to go. And one anticipates, if you are talking about efficiency, all right, that is an approach that you will take. I am not saying, and I'll be crazy to say, that the chairperson could just come and make decisions without any discussions, but I am saying that your discussions with the committee must be informed on the basis of government policies. And if what we are saying is in disagreement, well, that is a different conversation. You will know what to do. You will report back to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet what are the views of Labour and also the private sector, because suffice it to say that in some of the discussions, there was a meeting of minds with Labour and the private sector, and in some instances, the government representatives, e.g., the question of COVID leave. We had a long discussion on that. There was buy-in by everybody. And then all in a sudden, I hear somebody say that workers going to take that, abuse it. And it took a little while before some of that was implemented.
Well, we're still awaiting the government's official work from home policy. We're still awaiting the government's COVID leave policy. We're still awaiting all sorts of stuff. So I don't know. We have a call, Mr. Anisette. We have a call.
Good morning,
I want to raise something after with Mr. Anisette. Hello?
Yeah, morning, Michael Anisette. Morning, everybody. Morning. Michael Anisette, I want to ask a question. I was listening to the Prime Minister saying that they cannot pay back pay because it will end up in a certain amount of billions of dollars or millions of dollars. But what are you saying? Get the money borrowed and pay the back pay so we could kickstart the whole system. Because right now everything is shutting down, people are walking away, people build business smaller because they have no money generated in the system. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I agree with you that a level of the back pay is in the best interest of the economy. And if you inject that funds, it will only help the economy.
Borrow the money to pay the back pay?
Yes. What is wrong with that? We will borrow money to do all kind of things. So what is wrong in borrowing money to pay workers, which is a productive payment because the economy benefits from it? That is our economic labor policies that we understand that this government don't want to follow. What is wrong? I want somebody to tell me what is wrong, and I could show you how many things that this government borrow money on in billions of dollars that didn't make sense. So what is wrong? And I'm not saying borrow.
That's a good question for our audience tomorrow. That's a good question for the audience for tomorrow. Should the government borrow money to pay the back pay? We'll ask that question tomorrow.
Listen, say what I say. You borrow some of the money, and that money will be injected into the economy.
Should the government borrow part of the money needed to pay the
then we could sit down and discuss because the government have not yet discussed with us how we're going to address the issue of the back pay. The government. Let
me ask this question quickly on that, Mr. Anisette. Will you accept the FCB shares if that is on offer?
No, well, I would buy it personally. I would buy it personally.
Because you can afford to buy it personally.
I know the value, and I will tell my membership there, I will know the value of owning shares, which is really well created.
But what Wendell is asking, essentially, would you advise your members to accept
this is what I am
as part of a settlement?
As part of the settlement.
What I am saying. I will advise our members. I will even go further and suggest to the government that they may have members who don't have houses, and we could use their back pay as a mechanism of paying down on a government house. It has so many mechanisms and creative and innovative ideas that you could put on the table, and we cannot be mined into the stereotype long-time way of looking at
So,
things.
Mr. Anisette, why does the union lead the way in that type of discussion? Why wait until the government comes with it?
Hello, you are making a statement.
I'm asking a question.
No,
it's a question I'm asking.
No, all right. Well, then.
When you start with why is a question, Wendell, you know that, right?
No,
a statement don't start with why.
It's a question.
Comrade, you ask me why.
Yeah.
All right. You understand? So then we have had and we have placed those kind of discussions on the table. And I will ask the Minister of Finance, when NATUC had its discussion with him, that was placed on the table. And he said, are you serious, Mr. And he said, I say yes. All right. And we are prepared to look at it and say, okay. And that is all right. And that is how far we reach. But you ain't want to give us back pay. You ain't want to give us wage increases. How the economy is going to grow. That's a fundamental.
I don't think the back pay is a matter of if they want to. It's just a matter of how much based on the negotiations.
How much based on what they prepare to offer the union. And then the question of the wages, in our humble view, is conditioned on watching at the back pay, not whether or not the workers' wages and households.
Is that fair? Because it's also predicated on what the country can afford moving forward, in the words of the Prime Minister.
comrade, let us get serious. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I hear the Prime Minister talk about GDP growth and we're better off. But we know in economics, you could have high GDP growth and it has nothing to do with wages that workers get. The question that we have to ask ourselves as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, are we satisfied? Are we better off? Are we comfortable with the various institutions? If we go to a hospital, if we go to get this thing.
I fully agree. The services provided by the state.
Right.
Yeah, I fully agree.
And then we want to sit down and we really want to discuss that, because it's not good for your economy that I have to take 2 days to go and get a license. Let us get serious.
And you think a better salary will fix that? You think a better salary will fix that?
Obviously. It wouldn't fix it. It wouldn't fix it 100%. But then what we know, based on our studies, all right, is that if workers feel that they are being paid and they are comfortable, their output is much better than a worker who is depressed based on the fact that he believes that he's not treated fairly. That is a human behavior, psychological issue.
And that's extrinsic motivation. We have the phone lines open. Our guest is Mr. Michael Anisette. We're talking about, of course, the labor movement.
Yeah. I want to go back quickly to the COVID leave thing and an apparent abuse that's taken place in the public sector and possibly in the private, with people going and getting these certificates from the medical fraternity that they have been in contact with a COVID positive case, and they naturally go on quarantine for 10 to 14 days. Apparently, people are repeating that process throughout the service. I don't know if you've heard of it, but certainly I know of it. I know of someone who has done it.
I have heard about it. I've known people who are genuinely sick about 2 or 3 times. All right, I know about workers who, when we didn't understand the system, they would have had clouded minds and other ailments coming out of the COVID that doctors couldn't identify, and they send them back to work. So this is a work in progress. And let me make it clear from the trade union perspective, the abuse of anything, included COVID sick leave, is something that we have condemned and we would not support. And as I intimated to you, all right, that we would have had issues and we were able to deal with them in the Port-au-Port-au-Spain, in Point Lisas, in Whitco, in Angostura, and all these areas. You understand? The issue is, to me, is the willingness to sit down and dialogue and engage one another fairly, where truth, right, becomes paramount, because the most you could do about truth is to push it aside, but it will still remain the truth. And I always tell my representatives and them, you must always first address the issue of truth. Who is right and who is wrong, you have to be very concerned about that. And it must not be that because you're representing anybody, that they could do whatever they want and you don't have the ability to pull that person aside and say, look, Chief, you got to watch what you are doing because it doesn't make sense. And we need to transition into that kind of relationship and governance in terms of how we run the country too. Not only in the labor market, but in terms of how we govern the country too. The question of ethical behavior and holding people accountable, all right, is what we are talking about.
All right, we do have a call. Mr. Anisette. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Hi. Good morning to Mr. Anisette.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I'm listening to what you are saying, but I need some form of clarification, because if it is at the National Tri-Party Action Committee, which is between labor, government, and the unions, and it was commenced since 2016 with the inception of the government, right? Correct? So I could recall on 2 occasions where you all left the, well, you could say the greater part of the table, all right? And one of those had to do when Mr. Rouget left as a result, wanted a commitment from government pertaining to the public sector members in terms of government commitment that they have a 3-month memorandum. My question is, how is it that if it is that the union is not making that willingness, because if the whole gist of it is negotiating, does not the negotiation start by you being there in terms of going before and actually starting the process, rather than taking up a stance that
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, again, you see, we juxtaposing that this committee supersedes collective bargaining, which is under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago under the Industrial Relation Act. So this committee cannot supersede that law because we are guided by law as it relates to industrial relations and collective bargaining. So I want people to understand that this committee is about a broader aspect of the economy, right? It's about how we grow the economy. What do we do to increase productivity? How do we become competitive as a country, as a nation? Right? What creativity and innovativeness that we could talk about that will drive the economy to another level. These are the kinds of discussions, right, that committee has been charged with. There is a responsibility. So I don't want nobody to misunderstand what is the role of the committee and then what is the role of collective bargaining, which the government has a legal responsibility to meet and treat in good faith with the respective unions for the workers that you employ as a government, because you now become an employer and there's a legal responsibility for you to meet and treat with the unions in good faith. That is a separate issue to that of the committee.
Our next call.
No.
Richard talking, but we're not here.
So that issue of the collective bargaining and stuff, because I know that the CPO would have been doing a job evaluation exercise that has been going on for several years, I guess. And I think they're close to the reports are that they're close to the completion of that exercise. Wouldn't that job evaluation exercise not make it easier to conclude negotiations in a more timely manner on behalf of the state? Isn't that the point of it too?
No. A job evaluation is to determine where your salary falls in the context of the market in the country. All right, right. It doesn't supersede the collective bargaining process.
No, I'm not talking about superseding it, I'm just saying that because the CPO is integral to that collective bargaining process, doesn't that job evaluation exercise assist in making those negotiations more timely than they are? Because you started off the conversation by talking about the fact that the government knows that they have these negotiations to do, they delay, and then they talk about, they have a huge back pay to pay.
No, I don't share that. I don't share that view. Why? Because from where we sit within the labor movement and the analysis that we have been doing, that the policy and the fiscal policy of the government is one of wage restraint and depressing wages, while the inequality in terms of income and wealth begin to grow wider, frighteningly. So I don't share that. If you're telling me that the government policy is to start negotiations like you do in other jurisdictions 6 months before the expiry date of a collective agreement or even a year, so you will ensure that when the end of the negotiation comes, that you would have settled all outstanding matters, so then there is no back pay, because and then you will know what I'm speaking of. The question of value time of money is something that is fundamental, because no matter what back pay that I get now, It
You'd have
cannot
lost.
compensate, right, for 10 years ago.
Yeah. Your value of your money has decreased.
And also
Yeah.
negotiating in for now in time frames when the economy may be in a downward spiral, and saying, well, you're negotiating for then when we can't afford it now. It's just counterproductive all the way around.
Yes, it is. It is. And then let me make it clearer that if the economic, right, determine what happens, which will determine the wage increases, will be reflective of the realities. But when you tell me that for 10 years you refuse, right, to negotiate, and then come and tell me, all right, I'm going to give you 0.0002% or 1%, 0.0001%. That is a prescription for confusion. That is a prescription that is not in the best interest of the economic. And
when you're negotiating for 4 years ago, when you're negotiating for, I think it's interesting that you're negotiating with the prevailing economic circumstances for periods that when you may have had booms.
Yeah, no,
it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, may have had, and then it is no fault of the unions and the workers.
Yeah. Well, then, I said, we are out of time, unfortunately, but of course, always interesting talking to you. We appreciate your time and contribution.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Anizat, I look forward to that image, that picture of you and Dr. Oli shaking hands and saying, settled, everything is good now. I look forward to that image. That
not
picture.
At 4.
Huh?
If it's 4, you won't see that picture. For sure. If it's 4, you will never see that picture. Right?
If it's forward.
If it's 4 that they're offering, the 4 that they're offering, you will never see that picture.
No, I think you'll say.
Mr.
No,
it might be 4. It might be 4 as an FCB shares. It might be 4 on housing. It might be 4 on FCB shares. Don't say that.
Well then, he didn't say that.
I just said I look forward to the picture, and the image, and I think I will see it.
I look forward to see that the business community and everybody benefit from what is happening. It cannot be, and it must not be. It's only a group of people, the owners of capital, who benefits from everything, and we have to pay the price. You do not build a society of equality when you allow the income and wage gap and household gaps and whatnot to continue the way how it is continuing. The reality is that workers, policemen, I know that as a fact, and you know that, public servant, everybody have to do 2 jobs in order to make ends meet. Is that the kind of society that we want? That is the conversation that we have.
That's biblical, eh? Biblically, you're really supposed to be doing 3 to 4 jobs, eh?
Tell me, biblical?
3 to 4 jobs.
Which one in the Bibles you?
And some people can't get 1 job.
I'm just
and some people can't get 1 job.
I'm just saying, depending on one source, depending on one source of income is a recipe for poverty.
No. I disagree with you. It have some people who only have one source of income and they has 6 cars.
And you know why? That's because the money. That's because they put in the money to work for them.
They own their own business. Guys, we gotta go. News is next. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
We're gonna have this discussion again, Mr. Anizat.
All right, yeah. I really want to have this discussion. Call me before the week finish. We need
all
to
right,
continue.
great. Take care.
All right, blessings.
Thanks, Mr. Michael Anizat, for being on the Power Breakfast Show on Power 102 Digital. We'll chat soon.
Okay, I do.
All right, all the best. All right, let's get into.
Blessings to Trinidad and Tobago. Blessings always.
Excellent, thank you. All right, let's get into our news brief, all powered by Champlain Auto Services.
This is your news bulletin from Power 102 Digital.